The Long Road by Wolfland. You'll protect the meteor? Eyes blinking in confirmation, Cladle hummed a happy note. Stephen nodded. Then I need to get to Fall Arbor as soon as possible and alert Professor Cosmo. That is, if he's not already on his way. But as he turned to leave, Stephen hesitated, with a look back towards the Baltoy colony.
Don't worry, my boy. They won't be fighting alone.
Surprised, Stephen turned to see Dusty holding a Pokeball in his hand.
Ha ha! Desert exploration isn't the only thing old Dusty can do,
he proclaimed, with a thumb proudly jabbed to his chest.
You go find that professor of yours, and leave the rest to us.
For all the Ruin Maniac's boisterous bragging, Stephen realized he had nothing but the best intentions, and some of his nervousness melted away with a smile.
Thanks, Dusty. Think nothing of it, my boy. Now, you better be on your way.
But Dusty's send-off was cut short by a panicked rattle that shot up from the midst of the gathered Baltoy to their right. All eyes darted to the sound of the disturbance as Cladle let loose a sharp shriek of surprise. A group of men dressed in red cloaks shoved their way through the sea of Baltoy, annoyance clearly written across their features.
Get out of the way, you runts!
The person at the head of the group lashed out with a kick, knocking Baltoy around with his boot.
Hey!
The shout burst forth from Stephen before he could reconsider attracting the men's attention, but he couldn't just sit by and watch their terrible treatment of the Baltoy. The red-clad group turned towards him, and a look of bored recognition flitted across the leader's face.
Oh, it's just that kid from earlier. Didn't we tell you to get lost? Let the professionals take care of everything from here.
Stephen's glare was firm, and Matang floated forward to its trainer's side, bristling with psychic energy.
No.
The leader's eyes narrowed menacingly.
What did you say?
I don't know who you are or why you're looking for this meteor, but I know you're not working for Professor Cosmo, and I won't allow you to take it. His tone was as icy as his stare. Almost in response to his declaration, the wind whipped up in a frenzy, and Stephen knew it was no natural phenomenon. The sandstorm grew in intensity, as Cladle's low whine of agreement echoed across the desert. But the hostile change in weather didn't deter the men in red, and as one of the group spoke in a handheld radio, the rest pulled out Pokeballs from beneath their cloaks.
Who's gonna stop us? You and that old geezer back there? I'd like to see you try.
At the man's overt threat, his group released their Pokemon in a bright flash of light, and Stephen could feel every muscle in his body grow tense. This group was itching for a fight, and for all his bravado, he and Dusty were handily outnumbered. Matang reverberated a low note as it stared down the hostile gathering of Poochyena and Nummel, complete with several coughing floating overhead. Desperately searching for a strategy to fend off the intruders, Stephen ran out of time. Without warning, a burst of flame cut through the blowing sand, and several Baltoy toppled over in the crater, knocked out by the attack. The men in red were not going to wait.
Ruffians!
Blurted Dusty, his cheeks puffing in anger. Stephen leapt into action. Matang, stop those Pokemon with confusion! We can't let them get to the meteor!
Absolutely, my boy! We'll fight together! Go, Sun Slash!
A ground type, perfect for battling in this sandstorm. Stephen smiled. Dusty would be a handy partner in this battle after all. Great! I'll go after the poison-type Pokemon with Matang, while you aim for... But Dusty's roar cut him off, and Stephen paled when he heard the command.
Earthquake!
Dutifully raising its two clawed hands high, Sandslash let out a fierce cry before bringing them down in a thunderous blow on the desert floor. The resulting shockwave pulsed across the sand, scattering particles in its wake. Stephen only had time to draw a startled breath before the ground rippled into monstrous waves from the attack. Pokemon and trainer alike were tossed to and fro in the quake. As the ground stilled beneath his feet, Steven frantically searched the battlefield for Matang. To his dismay, he found his partner half buried in the sand, barely clinging to consciousness. Sprinting to his starter's side, he cradled Matang's battered form in his arms. The opponent's Pokemon fared no better, save for the weightless coughing, but Steven couldn't hide his incredulity as he shouted to his teammate, "Dusty, what were you thinking? We have to work together!"
"Sorry, my boy, I got a bit carried away."
Matang's weak chattering snapped Steven's attention back to the battle before he could further admonish Dusty's poor excuse. One of the opposing trainers slowly picked himself off the ground as he waved a signal to yet another group of red-clad reinforcements that had just arrived. Steven gritted his teeth. Just how many of them are there? The situation was dire. He couldn't hold off another wave of attacks with Matang injured as it was, and Dusty's overzealous earthquakes meant that any other member of his team would be vulnerable to the same fate. Just as he resigned to seeing if Lyron could withstand the friendly fire, a shadow fell at his feet with a hollow whine. Cladle? The ground type slowly rotated in midair, fixing its gaze first on Steven and Matang, and then narrowing its eyes sharply on the new wave of opposing trainers. Matang hastily waved an arm towards the Desert Doll Pokemon and echoed a short cry that Cladle returned in kind. Steven's eyes went wide. Cladle, are you willing to team up with me? Its reverberating call carried the clear affirmative, and Steven set his jaw with determination. Then let's go. Scanning the battlefield, Steven found Dusty Sandslash tearing into one of the remaining coughing. Leaping to his feet, he quickly recalled Matang and shouted towards his fellow trainer, "Dusty, let loose another one of those earthquakes!" "Roger that!" Steven relayed the rest of his plan to his new teammate. "Now, Cladle, get in close and pick off anything that survives." As the ground shook once more, yells of dismay and pained Pokemon cries came from the opponent's side of the field, and Steven smiled as a coughing dropped from the skies from Cladle's psychic attacks. Once the dust settled for a second time, the red-cloaked intruders gaped in surprise as their Pokemon lay decimated across the battlefield. Sandslash and Cladle drew back in tandem, totally unscathed. Their combination had worked perfectly. Before Steven could issue an ultimatum for the defeated trainers to beat a hasty retreat, a loud hissing sounded across the battlefield. All eyes turned towards the source of the sound at the center of the crater. From his vantage point, it seemed as if the meteor was shrinking. The fierce battle had upset the meteor's resting place, and with one last gurgle, the desert swallowed the meteor whole. For the second time in as many visits to the desert, Steven had to watch a prized specimen sink into the sand.
"Oh, for crying out loud! Now look what you've done!"
The Red Cloak leader's outburst brought everyone's attention back to his group, including the Baltoy, who turned in unison with a loud rattle. Faced with several hundred angry Pokemon, the fake scientists quickly backpedaled before breaking into a sprint, the Baltoy hot on their heels. Over the wind, Steven swore he heard a shout fade into the distance.
"Leader Maxie's gonna kill